The first thing I did after being reborn was quietly kick away the magnolia flower by my foot because the most dazzling young general of the Great Liang dynasty had publicly declared,
"Whoever picks up the jade lotus flower shall be my wife."
Noble ladies throughout the hall scrambled frantically to find it, but I quietly kicked the flower at my feet toward someone else. In my previous life, when I picked up that flower, Yanxi just stood there, indifferent. Later, I found out he was merely acting out of spite. His beloved had married another, and he wanted to prove he had long moved on. But I spent my entire life living in the shadow of his beloved and drowned in endless regret, ending my life. Now, living this life anew, the magnolia flower I had already kicked away was swept back by a chilling gust of wind out of nowhere and landed squarely on my lap. The Empress smiled, ready to decree a marriage.
Let me make the decision.
I immediately knelt and interrupted. Your humble servant dares not. Your humble servant already has someone she admires. I found an excuse to leave. The evening breeze blew, carrying the slight chill of early spring. The white magnolias in the rear courtyard stood out under the moonlight. I drew in a sharp breath of cool air. I had actually returned to this evening banquet, back to my 16-year-old self, not yet bound by fate. In my previous life, when I found that flower behind my seat, I thought the heavens had answered my prayers, but I never imagined that would be the last moment of joy in my life. In my previous life, when I married into the general's manor, all of the capital came to watch the spectacle.
They say General Yan didn't even glance at her appearance. He just casually tossed the flower. With her lowly family background, is she even worthy of him? Marrying and will only bring her suffering.
On our wedding night, Yanxi did not show up. Just as dawn was about to break, a maidservant quietly told me, "The general has fallen asleep in the study." I lifted the bridal veil myself and drank the nuptial wine alone. The red candles on the table burned out, tears of wax dripping down. Early the next morning, Yanxi left for the front lines without a word. From then on, everyone in the household understood. The general despised his bride. I endured endless criticism from my mother-in-law.
Coming from a common family, you simply have no sense of propriety. You can't even keep your husband. What use are you then?
I knelt on both knees, not daring to lift my head. Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill. I asked myself again and again, Xue Zhuxin, what exactly did you do wrong? Your mistake was marrying a man who doesn't love you. But in this life, you never really had a choice. In the 5th year of our marriage, Yanxi returned from the front lines. He arrived home in the middle of the night. I was exhausted, yet I still observed the household rules. Waiting for him in the main hall with a single lamplit, Yanxi had likely long abandoned such formalities. Seeing me, he was visibly surprised. I smiled obediently, waiting for my husband. Yanxi's gaze flickered for a long moment. He pulled me into a tight embrace and let out a long sigh.
"My wife has suffered. From now on, I will never leave again."
I froze. My long cold heart suddenly gave a fierce beat. That night, he stayed. His kisses were fierce and urgent, leaving me nearly breathless. "Husband." He gripped my waist, his voice low and deep.
"Call me General, and I'll let you go."
After that night, he acted like a young man newly in love, buying me little trinkets every few days. Jewelry and accessories, sweets and pastries. At the time, I had no idea. His return to the capital this time, mainly because his first love had given birth just as when he married me, because his first love had married someone else. I was completely clueless. I was just innocently happy. I thought life was finally turning around. Until that night. Yanxi stumbled into my bedroom, dead drunk. This time, he didn't turn off the lamp. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, studying me. He had never looked at me with such tender eyes before. Then, he called me
Changhuan.
A chill ran through my whole body. Who hasn't heard of Meng Changhuan, the dynasty's only female commander, renowned for her repeated victories, equal in rank to Yanxi, silver steed, crimson spear. So magnificent. That night, Yanxi's actions were unlike before, exceptionally gentle, but I couldn't stop the tears from falling. The bright, pure moonlight blended into my tears, becoming the look in my eyes. I remembered that banquet many years ago, when the young commander, in a fit of pique, tossed a white magnolia behind my chair. I thought back over these years in the general's inner courtyard, how I wept at the sound of each night watch, enduring until daybreak. The pain was tearing me apart. Yanxi didn't notice a thing. He lay upon me, his shadow nearly swallowing me whole. Yet tenderly, deeply, he called out again and again,
Changhuan. Changhuan.
In the days and years that followed, I kept to my place, treating him with polite detachment. Even my most critical mother-in-law couldn't find fault. I once overheard Yanxi sigh to his subordinates.
"Lady Shi manages the household well, but alas, Zhuxin is not the one I love. My heart was left on the frontier long ago."
I had long stopped caring, but I didn't understand why my heart still ached.
Meng Changhuan fell in battle.
Yanxi shut himself in his room. He refused to see anyone. I had no intention of bothering with him. It was his subordinates who were at their wits' end. They came to beg for my help.
Please just go in and check on the commander.
When I walked in, the room was unlit. Yanxi wrapped his arms around me from behind.
Meng Changhuan, don't leave me.
His voice was slurred and indistinct, laced with choking sobs.
I accepted it when you married another. I accepted it when you bore his child. But why did you have to die in battle?
Scattered across the desk were many unsent letters. I made out the opening of each one. Every single one began with Changhuan. I stood there in the shadows, listening to his weeping. It went on for a very, very long time. Then, I decided to grant him his wish. I took those letters brimming with affection, one by one, and laid them out on the floor. I'm weak-willed by nature. Since childhood, I've never done a single thing out of line. I never even dared to raise my voice. But at that moment, I suddenly no longer wanted to go on like this. I set the love letters ablaze. I didn't wake him. The letters burned to ash, curling and shriveling, like paper money offered at a funeral. Commander Meng is gone. A man of such deep feeling as you should rightly go with her. The flames flickered across my face, now bright, now dark. I caressed Yanxi's cheek, my voice a soft, gentle murmur. Did you hear me clearly? She is so alone. General Yanxi, go and be with her. Follow her. I have burned all your letters and sent them to her. Now, it is your turn to be sent. The flames suddenly surged, crawling onto the hem of his robe. I rose and melted into the darkness. I didn't know where I was heading. I couldn't return to my parents' home, and my husband's home was even less my own. The world is so vast. But where else could I possibly go? Servants rushed past me in a panic.
Quick, find the madam.
How foolish. I wanted to shout, what madam? The madam doesn't know how to put out a fire. I stared at my own reflection in the water. She had always been meek and submissive, like a clay statue, completely without temper, letting others mold her as they please. But now, her eyes curved with laughter. She was actually laughing wildly. She said to me, Xue Zhuxin, you are free. The moment the reflection shattered, moonlight fell upon the corridor. I looked up at the white magnolias on the tree. I recalled the banquet earlier that evening. Yanxi was still the young commander I once knew, arrogant, looking down on everyone. Only when I broke off our engagement did a flicker of life show in his eyes.
Rest assured, I would never stoop to wanting you.
I was still lost in that memory when a mocking laugh suddenly sounded by my ear.
You fool.
A chill crept up my spine. I whipped my head around. At the far end of the corridor, a figure stood in the shadows, skin deathly pale, eyes an abyssal black. Yet, under the moonlight, he cast no reflection. No, I'd wager you're not human, but a demon that crawled out of the ashes, not fully consumed by the great fire of my past life. A breath of icy air brushed my neck. He called out to me with a grin.
My wife.
I let out a soft sigh. Truly. Such a pity. Yanxi leaned in with a half-smirk, and I could even sense the chill, gloomy aura radiating from him.
You seem quite regretful.
Indeed, I replied, my eyes curving with a smile, my voice low. I only regret I didn't burn you to ashes, Commander. Instead, you've come back to haunt me, caught between life and death. The night wind suddenly picked up. Yanxi gently stroked my face.
You are my lawfully wedded wife, whether in the netherworld or the living realm. Of course, I must stay by your side.
The news of my broken engagement spread throughout the city within 3 days. The street gossip grew more and more outrageous, until it finally became, the second Miss Xue looks down on Commander Yan. The second Miss Xue already has a secret lover. The Shi family holds a very low position. My father is merely a 5th-rank civil official. My mother's lifelong wish was simply for me to make a splendid marriage.
The Yen family, what an excellent match. So many people would do anything to climb that high. And you, of all people, you break off the engagement to his face and even make up some nonsense about a sweetheart.
My mother wiped away her tears.
You tell mother, who is this man?
I lowered my head. There is no such person. I simply do not wish to marry Yanxi. My mother's tears fell even harder, as if I had committed a terrible crime. But what exactly did I do wrong? My only fault is refusing to marry a man I dislike and who dislikes me in return. I've merely lived 2 lifetimes, and I don't want to endure those days again. At dusk, the vengeful ghost appears.
Look at yourself. Who would dare have you?
Yanxi mocked coldly.
Even if we start this game anew, you still have no choice but me.
He has been tailing me for days now, nowhere to be seen in broad daylight. But once night falls, he shows up. Sometimes he stands in the corridor, sometimes he sits on the rooftop. Most of the time, he just hovers behind me, muttering under his breath. Just hovers behind me, muttering under his breath. I couldn't care less. He doesn't even have a body anymore. He is nothing but a lonely, wandering ghost. His greatest trick? Nothing more than stirring up that cold draft at the banquet. I shot back. Choose you? You're already long gone, but I'm still alive. Who will have me? That is none of your concern. Yanxi had been hit where it hurt. He glared at me fiercely.
You broke off the engagement publicly. He won't let you off easy.
I let out a soft laugh. Did that fire fry his brain too? If he wants to see a spectacle, he should just go look in a mirror. You mean that little trinket? I'll be waiting. The day of the hunt. The weather was clear. I hadn't planned on coming. It was an invitation from the Empress. Whose order is this? It is perfectly obvious.
The young Commander Yan still has you on his mind.
Mother had finally stopped crying. She took my hand.
Zhuxin, this is a tremendous honor. You mustn't make any more trouble.
A tremendous honor. Or a tremendous joke? I lowered my head and said nothing more. In the Empress's tent, the finest goose pear incense was burning. The noble ladies sat in small groups, whispering amongst themselves.
That is the second daughter of the Xue family. She actually broke off the engagement with Commander Yan to his face. How ungrateful.
I'd heard such talk countless times in my previous life. Back then, when I married into the commander's mansion, they mocked me for climbing too high. Now that I've called off the engagement, suddenly, I'm the one who doesn't know her place. While we were chatting, Yanxi arrived. Half the noble ladies in the tent blushed. Today, he wore a black military tunic, broad-shouldered and narrow-waisted, his posture ramrod straight. After paying his respects to the Empress, his gaze slowly settled on me.
So the second young lady of the Xue family is here too.
I didn't answer. He didn't take offense. The Empress smiled and said,
You're not heading to the hunting grounds, yet you've come to pay your respects to me instead.
No hurry.
Yanxi smiled as well.
Aunt, you have black tea here. I'll have a sip before I go.
In the brief moment he spoke, he glanced down at me again.
Second young lady Xue, has that sweetheart of yours shown up today?
I lifted my chin and stared right back at him. He was lounging carelessly, a mocking smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Over the past few days, he dug up everything there was to know about me. Of course, he'd found out that so-called sweetheart was a complete fabrication. This humble girl has no sweetheart. Yanxi raised an eyebrow.
Then at the banquet that night, who was it that said?
That day, this humble girl was feeling unwell. My words were thoughtless. I lowered my head, my manner perfectly respectful. I asked the junior commander's forgiveness. The tent fell silent. The noble ladies exchanged glances, but it was Yanxi who laughed out loud, his face a picture of cold arrogance.
Xue Zhuxin, this isn't up to you. Whether you like it or not, you picked up my flower, so you're my bride.
The hunting lodge was deep in the mountains. When we entered the mountain path, the Empress took my hand, insisting I sit with her.
ACI is a bit tongue-tied, but deep down he cares for you greatly.
His smile was tinged with melancholy.
See, he is set on marrying you.
Terrified, I bowed my head. The Empress studied me for a moment. I couldn't fathom what Yanxi saw in me, which only vexed me more. The carriage rolled slowly forward, following the trail deeper into the mountains. A spring breeze swept through, carrying the scent of blossoms. Everything seemed fine. I fished a handkerchief from my sleeve. It was given to me as we entered the mountains by a girl, in yellow, from a wealthy family.
There are many mosquitoes in these woods. Use this to keep them away.
I recognized her. In this life, she was the one who'd first picked up Yanxi's flower at the evening banquet. Just now, in the Empress's tent, when Yanxi declared he'd marry me, her eyes had reddened. I didn't refuse. Pretending fear, I accepted it. In my last life, I'd heard elders in my household speak of
A certain spice from the borderlands, harmless to people. It would drive wild beasts mad with rage.
I never expected, in this life, someone would use this trick to deal with me. What a pity. The carriage reached a secluded forest path. I discreetly tucked the handkerchief into a gap in the seat cushion. This spot was extremely close to the Empress, so close that if a beast came, she would be the first it bit, no question. The Empress was still chatting with the other noble ladies, completely unaware. Suddenly, the forest fell silent. No birdsong, no cicada cries, not even a breath of wind. A thunderous roar erupted from the woods.
A wild beast. Protect Empress, protect Empress.
But it was already too late. In the blink of an eye, a fierce, massive tiger lunged at the carriage, so fast the guards couldn't even react. The Empress turned deathly pale. In that moment of life and death, I shielded the Empress with my own body. Everyone screamed. In the second, the tiger lunged to bite. I spun around and drew the diamond-studded dagger hanging from the Empress's waist. and plunged it deep into the beast's neck. Scalding blood sprayed everywhere, but the tiger's attack didn't stop. Its claws raked across my shoulder, drenching me in fresh blood. The impact sent me flying. I slammed hard onto the ground. The tiger was enraged now. Growling low, it advanced on me. The dagger was still lodged in its neck. I had lost my weapon, so I could only push myself backward with my hands. The wound on my shoulder was agonizing. Blood streamed down my arm, leaving a dark trail across the ground. The tiger closed in, step by step. Its eyes were filled with murderous intent. The guards were rushing over, terrified. They weren't far now.
Just hold on a little longer.
Just hold on, and it'll be over. But the tiger gave me no respite. It bared its teeth, its fangs, stark white and ghastly, its foul breath overwhelming. My hands scrabbled blindly in the dirt, scooping up a fistful of sand and gravel, and I flung it straight into its eyes. In that split second, the tiger froze. I rolled aside, grabbed a broken branch, and held it up in front of me. The tiger charged at me in a frenzy. My eyes widened sharply. That moment seemed to stretch into an eternity. In that hair's breadth between life and death, a flash of cold light seared across my vision. A red-tasseled spear cut through the air and buried itself deep in the beast's skull. The tiger's massive body slammed to the ground. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. The young commander planted a foot on the beast's head. He bent down to look at me.
That's quite the nerve you've got.
His voice was crisp and clear, carrying a teasing edge. Clearly, it was a woman's voice. She raised an eyebrow.
You dared to jab a wild beast with nothing but a twig?
I froze. From behind me drifted Yanxi's trembling voice. Yanxi's face was full of delight.
When did you return to the capital? Why didn't you send word? I would have come to greet you.
Grand Commander Yan.
Meng Changhuan cut him off. Her tone was polite yet cold.
I returned to the capital by order. No need to trouble yourself.
Yanxi's hands clenched, then relaxed. His gaze settled on me.
By the way, Changhuan.
Yanxi seemed to suddenly recall something.
Allow me to introduce you. This is my intended bride, Xue Zhuxin.
As he spoke these words, his manner was casual, but his eyes never left Meng Changhuan. He thought she would be surprised or crestfallen, that she might care, even just a little, but Meng Changhuan merely gave an, "Oh." Then he glanced at me, and then back at Yanxi.
Your intended bride?
Yanxi wore his usual carefree smile.
She seemed agreeable at the banquet.
So I settled it while I was at it. Meng Changhuan let out a test. Yanxi's smile froze.
What's the matter?
Meng Changhuan didn't answer him. She looked intently at me, tilting his head, puzzled.
Xue Zhuxin, what in the world made you take a liking to him?
Yanxi's expression shifted. I was stunned too. Meng Changhuan didn't wait for him to answer. He tore off a piece of his sleeve without hesitation and casually bandaged my wound. Yanxi stood rooted to the spot, his face alternating between pale and flushed.
Changhuan, what is your problem?
Your fiancé is injured, and you don't even ask if she is in pain. Instead, you're here getting angry with me.
Meng Changhuan looked at him impassively.
Besides, we're both engaged to be married. Commander Yan, know your place.
With that, she scooped me up in her arms. She smelled faintly of something pleasant, a clean, fresh soap scent, so reassuring it made me want to drift off to sleep. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay alert. Classmate Meng, I called out to her softly, I can walk on my own. Meng Changhuan glanced down at me and said nothing. I bit my lip and repeated myself. She still ignored me, carrying me steadily forward. I had no choice but to push against her shoulder, but the moment my hand touched her clothing, she grabbed my wrist. It was covered in crescent-shaped red marks from my nails. My face went pale, embarrassed at being found out. Then I heard her sigh softly.
In this much pain and still pretending to be tough, Xue Zhuxin, you must have suffered a great deal.
I was jolted awake by the pain. The wound on my shoulder felt like it was being seared by fire. I curled up instinctively and heard a cold voice say,
"Don't move."
The tent was dim, lit only by a single small lamp. A young man sat by the bedside, leafing through a medical book. He had a refined, handsome face, with features about 70% similar to Meng Changhuan's, but without that assertive, striking presence. Instead, he exuded a strong sense of aloofness. He closed the medical book. He glanced at me.
"I just finished stitching your wound. If you tear it open, I can't guarantee I'll mend it neatly."
I blinked, stunned. Divine physician Meng. I had asked around about him, Meng Changhuan, the youngest chief physician in the Imperial Medical Bureau. Word in the city was that his medical skills were unmatched. Any difficult or complicated illness in his hands could be brought back from the brink of death. He didn't care for pleasantries, treating even the emperor with a cold expression, unwilling to offer a single extra smile. Meng Changning responded with a casual grunt, walked to the table, and picked up a brush to write a prescription.
Sister Jia asked me to look after you. She said you've got a lot of nerve and told me to keep an eye on you so you don't mess around and tear yourself open again.
Meng Changning raised his eyes to look at me.
If you've got something to say it.
Then what about Commander Meng? Meng Changning clicked his tongue with an air of, I knew it.
She has got work to do. Can't get away. But he couldn't rest easy leaving you here, so he kicked me over instead.
I quietly thanked him, only to hear him say,
I didn't want to come at first.
He shot me a glance.
I can't be bothered to save someone with a death wish. But the Empress herself also spoke up, telling me to tend to your wounds.
The guy's actually alright, just doesn't have a single pleasant word in his mouth. Just as I was muttering to myself, Meng Changning placed a small cyan bottle beside my pillow.
I'll come change the dressing once a day. If it hurts, swallow one. Don't try to tough it out.
I silently took back my previous thought. Well, there was one decent thing said after all. After Meng Changning left, I fiddled with the small cyan bottle and spoke softly. Have you seen enough? From a corner untouched by candlelight, a wandering spirit materialized.
Xue Zhuxin, you're truly vicious.
He stepped out of the darkness. Letting the moonlight pass through his body, he gave a cold snort.
You think I can't see what you're scheming?
I said nothing. His voice grew hoarse.
You went to such elaborate lengths to set a trap like this, nearly costing your own life, just to break off our engagement.
Our eyes met. Anger, confusion, and a deep sense of grievance.
We were wedded husband and wife. Do you truly have no heart?
I let out a surprised laugh. A bamboo heart is hollow to begin with. There is nothing wrong with that. Bamboo is strong because it is hollow. So the wind cannot break it, and the snow cannot snap it. He stared at me blankly. A layer of mist clouded his eyes. Can a ghost shed tears? I was puzzled, but on second thought, he no longer even had a body. Where would the tears come from? What kind of deep affection are you putting on an act for? After watching this drama for so many days, don't you find yourself utterly sickening? After that night, I never encountered that restless spirit again. I nursed my wounds for half a month and slowly began to move again. Meng Changning came daily as usual to apply medicine, always leaving in a hurry, never saying more than 5 sentences. One day, I spoke the 6th sentence on my own. Divine Dr. Meng, I wish to study medicine. He was tidying his medicine chest, paused his hands, and looked up at me.
Oh?
What was that supposed to mean? I soon found out. The next day, when Meng Changning came to apply medicine, he also brought a chest of books. The Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, Treatise on Cold Damage, Essentials from the Golden Cabinet, Essentials, Divine Farmer's Materia Medica, and Classic of Difficult Issues. Stacked together, they towered over me. Meng Changning spoke coldly.
Take a look.
I casually flipped one open and found his annotations inside. The corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. These medical texts felt entirely familiar to me. In my past life at the commander's residence, I had nothing but free time, no one to talk to, no one coming or going. My only pastime was reading. The residence's library had a whole shelf of medical books. I read them over and over until I could recite them from memory. Though some passages were extremely difficult to grasp, I had no one to guide me, so I could only half understand them. But now, with Meng Changning's annotations, I immediately grasped what had eluded me in my former life. When Meng Changning returned on the 7th day, he heard me say with a beaming smile, Dr. Meng, I've finished the books. Meng Changning, with a faint, ambiguous smile, picked up the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon. Recite the spiritual pivot. I opened my mouth and began without hesitation.
The Yellow Emperor asked Chibo, saying,
I govern the myriad people, nurturing the common folk and collecting their taxes. I lament their insufficiency and that they are afflicted with disease. I didn't recite quickly, sometimes needing to pause and think, but I didn't miss a single word. Meng Changning quietly picked up another volume.
On viscous and bowel, meridian and channel disorders, pulse patterns and syndromes. Part 1.
I answered with great fluency. The question is asked. The superior physician treats disease before it arises. How is this so? The teacher replied, one who treats disease before it arises, upon seeing a liver disorder, knows it will be transmitted to the spleen, and thus first fortifies the spleen. If the spleen is robust in all 4 seasons, and not susceptible to pathogenic factors, then do not supplement it. A mediocre physician, unaware of this transmission, upon seeing a liver disorder, does not understand the need to fortify the spleen, and merely treats the liver itself. I finished reciting, paused, and looked at him. Meng Changning was quite satisfied. He pulled a medical record from his medicine chest and tossed it in front of me.
Go through it and tell me, what is wrong with the prescription?
He dragged over a chair, sat across from me, and flipped through a book. By evening, I closed the medical record and handed it back. He glanced at my notes, and a faint smile crossed his face.
The compromise prescription we ended up using isn't as good as your new one. We'll continue tomorrow.
I blinked, suddenly feeling like both crying and laughing. I thought of Xue Zhuxin. Your past life wasn't wasted. Even if you journey through the dark of night, every step counts. The rear courtyard of the Imperial Medical Institute became my daily destination. I learned remarkably fast, so much so that even Meng Changhuan was astonished by my talent. In just 2 short months, the prescriptions I wrote were already good enough to serve as case studies. That day, I was sorting medicinal herbs when someone kicked the courtyard gate open with force.
The second young lady of the Xue household seems quite at leisure.
Yanxi looked down at me with an air of superiority.
I've been searching for you for over half a month.
So you've been hiding here at the Imperial Medical Institute. I rose directly to my feet, unhurried and unflustered. This humble maiden is studying medicine at the Imperial Medical Institute.
Studying medicine?
Yanxi scoffed.
You are about to be wed. What is the point of studying medicine?
I looked at him, puzzled. I have already broken off the engagement. Yanxia's expression darkened.
Who said so?
Her Majesty the Empress, half a month ago. This humble maiden asked Her Majesty for a favor. Her Majesty granted it. The general was not aware. After I regained consciousness, the Empress promised to grant me a favor. I spoke frankly. I want to break off the engagement with Yanxi. The Empress fell silent for a long moment.
That child ACI does have quite a temper. But you needn't.
I gently cut her off. I am not acting out of spite. Seeing my resolve, the Empress did not press further. Yanxi may have heard of this matter, but he did not take it seriously. Now he stood before me, his expression dark.
Xue Zhuxin, have you lost your mind?
Yanxi's lips moved slightly. Then his gaze suddenly fell upon Meng Changhuan in the room. Meng Changhuan was reading with his head bowed, seemingly oblivious to the commotion on this side. Yanxi stared at him for a moment, then abruptly seemed to understand.
You broke off our engagement because of this pretty boy.
I frowned. Imperial physician Meng is merely my teacher. Yanxi laughed scornfully.
A man and a woman, alone together in a room, and you tell me he is merely your teacher. I had no idea such filthy dealings went on within the palace.
I raised my hand and slapped him, saying coldly, "Hold your tongue, General Yan." My study of medicine under Imperial physician Meng was also granted by Her Majesty the Empress. Long after Yanxi had left, I still stood there, dazed. His parting words echoed in my mind.
Do you think breaking the engagement settles everything? Let me tell you, Xue Zhuxin, I happen to enjoy forcing people's hand.
Whether torn apart or taken alive, they all linger like restless ghosts. I thought to myself, expressionless. Meng Changhuan's voice came from behind. I turned around. He had come out at some point, his hand extended. He glanced at my reddened palm, no nails digging in.
That is progress.
I fell into deep thought. These siblings are truly cast from the same mold. Yanxi has been deeply troubled of late. The news that he'd been rejected again spread all over the capital, and it was approved by the Empress herself. He didn't even get a chance to defend himself.
AC. The second Miss Xue saved my life. I could hardly refuse her. Your aunt also understands you're not lacking in that regard, but she still can't swallow this insult.
What kind of woman couldn't Yanxi have?
Yet a daughter of a minor 5th rank official
Not only rejected the match in public, but took the initiative to break the engagement. Now the whole capital is laughing at him.
Have you heard? The second Miss Xu dumped young General Yan. That is not dumping, that is breaking an engagement. What is the difference? Either way, she doesn't want him anymore.
Lately, he kept recalling that scene in the mountains. Xue Zhuxin holding that branch covered in snow with such a resolute stance. He was restless. He didn't even have time to think about Meng Changhuan anymore. Yanxi crushed the wine cup in his hand. Shards cut his fingers, fresh blood streaming down, yet a cold laugh echoed from the study.
Is that all you've got?
Yanxi instantly drew his sword.
Who is there?
He turned and met the gaze of another version of himself. That person's face was pale as paper, eyes pitch black, and under the moonlight, he drifted weightlessly without a shadow. Yanxi's pupils contracted.
What the hell are you?
That thing smiled.
I'm you.
The ghost told him some things. For instance, in a past life, he and Xue Zhuxin had become husband and wife, and afterward, he died by her hand. Yanxi laughed.
Are you joking? You mean that wooden, dull woman? If you look down on her so much, then how come she broke off the engagement with you?
Yanxi's laughter died.
What are you here for?
He turned his head away, his tone stiff. The wraith drifted closer.
To teach you how to win her back.
Yanxi reacted as if he'd heard the most absurd joke.
Why on earth would I chase after a woman who broke off our engagement?
The wraith mimicked his own daytime demeanor, reciting without emotion.
Let me tell you, Xue Zhuxin, I happen to enjoy forcing people.
Yanxi fell into an odd, heavy silence.
You heard that too.
The wraith sneered.
Stubborn.
That night, Yanxi didn't sleep a wink. His mind was consumed by the wraith's words.
You just haven't lost her yet. You will regret it. Regret treating her that way. Go take a look. See what he does every day. See what kind of person he really is. And then what? After that, you'll end up just like me. Dying with a grievance that won't let your eyes close.
By a twist of fate, Yanxi believed the wraith's tale. Even he couldn't say exactly why. It was early summer. The locust tree's branches and leaves were thick, perfectly concealing his figure. He hid in the tree, secretly watching Xue Zhuxin. Sometimes she'd leisurely sort, crush, and brew herbs. Sometimes she'd sit across from Meng Changhuan, head bowed as she wrote out a prescription. What do you think? Meng Changhuan would reply, and she'd nod and keep writing. This was a Xue Zhuxin he had never seen before, so dazzling he couldn't tear his eyes away. He turned and left, but came back the next day, then the third day, the fourth, the fifth. He was just there to see exactly what ability Xue Zhuxin had to dare break off their engagement. Until one day, half a month later, it rained. He held an umbrella, carrying a food box in his right hand. Yanxi stood in the rain. He watched him take out a few plates of pastries from the food box, and then ladle out a bowl of hot porridge. He brought it over to Meng Changhuan. Meng Changhuan frowned, his face full of resistance. Xue Zhuxin blinked her eyes. If you skip breakfast, your spleen and stomach are left empty, and your digestion weakens. Vital energy and blood lack a source, and over time, all kinds of illnesses arise. Meng Changhuan was speechless. Meng Changhuan obediently picked up the bowl. Xue Zhuxin beamed with delight. That is more like it. Yanxi suddenly found the scene before him unbearably grating. He had never once eaten a meal she had cooked. That ghost had been her husband. He had no idea if that ghost had ever eaten her cooking. In that moment, Yanxi was consumed with jealousy. He thought about it for a full day and night. Early the next morning, he intercepted Xue Zhuxin on her way to the palace. The young general, always the center of attention, had no idea how to curry favor. He simply walked straight up to her and awkwardly spoke.
Xue Zhuxin, I'll teach you martial arts.
He had thought long and hard, and believed this was an excellent idea.
Last time you killed a tiger. Sooner or later, something will go wrong. Besides, the martial skills I teach are certainly more useful than those herbs Meng Changhuan fiddles with.
Xue Zhuxin, however, declined. Don't worry about it. Someone is already instructing me. Yanxi was dumbfounded.
Who? Meng Changhuan. That sickly weakling. He can't even slaughter a chicken.
Xue Zhuxin fell silent for a moment. He knows how to adapt. Yanxi was practically about to explode with rage.
Is that really the point?
He decided to go see for himself what was going on. That evening, he found Xue Zhuxin in the woods west of the city. She was wearing loose, unusual attire. She held a wooden sword in her hand. Meng Changhuan stood behind her. One hand gripped her wrist, the other pressed against her waist. He stepped back 2 paces, crossed his arms, and watched her practice. Yanxi stared, utterly dazed for a long while. His knuckles went white from clenching.
What sort of disgraceful behavior is this? Lurking here and spying, like some stray mad dog no one wants.
Yanxi spun around immediately, staring hard at that face identical to his own.
Then I'd like to ask you something. What did you do to her? The ghost froze. Why would she rather fight a tiger to the death than agree to marry you?
Yanxi stared into those evasive eyes, and suddenly understood everything.
You say you were husband and wife in a past life. In her heart, you were more terrifying than any wild beast.
The ghost's lips quivered, but not a single word could come out. His younger self watched him with a cold sneer, as if he were suddenly recalling those years from a former life. After a long silence, neither knew which of them spoke first to break it.
So much hate for you.
Meng Changhuan was preparing to return to the frontier. The frontline battles were intense. He had submitted a memorial to the court. He would leave the day after tomorrow. I turned it over in my mind all night, and went to find Meng Changhuan at the training grounds the next morning. He had just finished his drills, sweat beading on his brow. He thrust his long spear into the ground, leaned on it, and waited for me to speak. General Meng. I looked up at him. I've heard the front lines are short on army physicians. He raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to go on. I've been studying medicine for quite a while now. I can treat colds, injuries, and set broken bones. Imperial Physician Meng says I'm ready to practice on my own. I handed him Imperial Physician Meng's letter of recommendation. Truthfully, my skills are still far from adequate, but I want to seize this chance. When Imperial Physician Meng learned of my intention, he didn't press me with questions. He just quietly wrote the letter of recommendation. I secretly peeked at it. For someone with such a sharp tongue, his writing was surprisingly gentle. Possessing a tenacious character and exceptional medical skills, able to handle things on her own. Meng Changhuan didn't look at the letter.
I understand you, and I trust you.
She gently patted my shoulder. The day after tomorrow, before dawn, at the 10-mile pavilion outside the city. I won't wait if you're late. The afternoon sun was bright. I stood there, watching him ride away. In this world, how could anyone not fall for him? Riding a white horse, swift as a shooting star, living free and unrestrained in this life. Even his mischief was so open and honest. I lowered my head, and a faint smile touched my lips. I used to hate you a little, but now I realize you're so wonderful. I want to become like you. I quickly packed my belongings, a few sets of clothes, a set of acupuncture needles, the medical books from Physician Meng, the dagger from General Meng. These were all my possessions. I left a letter for my mother. Aside from the two Mengs, I told no one I was leaving. But in the middle of the night, an uninvited guest arrived.
Second Miss Xi, the general requests a word with you.
Before I could speak, a cloth covered my mouth and nose. When I came to, I was somehow dressed in wedding clothes. Ahead of me, a pair of wedding candles burned quietly. This is the general's residence. The scene felt very familiar.
My wife.
A pair of cold hands helped me up. Yanxi was dressed in a bright red wedding robe. His face bore a strange, sickly expression. I saw through it at a single glance. He was not the young Yanxi. The red candles cast their glow upon the bed.
On our wedding night back then, I deeply regretted not coming. If only we had drunk that nuptial cup together. Could we have lasted?
I turned my head away in revulsion. How could it be you? You killed him.
Are you pitying me? He let out a soft laugh. We were the same person all along.
I counted the night watches sounding from outside the door. I said nothing. Dawn was nearly breaking. Yanxi saw right through my thoughts. He said he had forged my handwriting in a letter to Meng Changhuan, saying that after much consideration, I still wished to remain in the capital, hoping the general would understand.
Meng Changhuan could leave, but you cannot go.
I stared at him blankly, trembling all over. You're insane? My tears streamed down. To live a second life and still end up with a lifetime like this. Seeing my tears, Yanxi knelt before me in alarm. He tried to wipe my tears away, but the more he wiped, the more they flowed.
I'm sorry.
His voice was trembling. He was actually shedding tears.
I'm sorry, Zhuxin. I'm sorry, please. Just give me one more chance. In this life, I will never fail you.
I stared at his pitiful, pleading expression, word by word. I hate you. Yanxi, with tears still on his face, smiled.
Then hate me. And never forget me.
He drew close to me, forehead to forehead.
If I can't have your love, then having your hate is just as good. In this life, you're only fit to be entangled with me. Until death.
He can actually cry? I think in that second, I suddenly understood. The one shedding tears now isn't him, but the young Yanxi. I saw two expressions fighting for control of Yanxi's face. One was the madness of a demon. The other, the confusion and pain of a young man. It seemed the two souls hadn't come to an agreement, fighting over this single body.
Get out now. You worthless thing, even at this point, you still want to let him go. She says he hates you. Can't you hear that? She is not willing. So what? I insist on forcing it. Don't you want to, as well?
Yanxi released me and gripped his own throat. While they were locked in fierce struggle, I fled. In the night, I rode my horse through the main street. The hem of my wedding robe was too long. Caught on the stirrup, I looked down and tugged twice, but couldn't free it, so I simply tore it off.
The weather is dry. Beware of fire.
The night watchman carried a lantern, his back bent as he passed the alley entrance. The firelight flickered in the dark night. Those night watch calls I once heard through tears were all left behind. This time, I don't need to wait bitterly for dawn. I will chase the sun myself. Forward, forward. Yanxi writhed in agony.
I'm telling you, I will definitely not become a pitiful sight like you.
He gasped for breath and forcefully plunged the dagger into his chest. The moment the blood flowed out, the demon finally ceased its struggle. This young body collapsed violently to the ground. In that instant of final silence, Yanxi recalled the Xue Zhuxin he had once dreamed of. That was his former self. He neither wept nor smiled. Trapped in this small courtyard, living out a solitary life sentence, Yanxi thought he shouldn't have to live like this.
Xue Zhuxin, this time, no one is stopping you. Let's go. Leave.
Yanxi strained to keep his eyes wide, staring at that open door. The evening breeze drifted in. The moment the candle was extinguished, the demon screamed in agony. After all his relentless fighting, seizing this body for his own, donning the wedding robes, lighting the marriage candles, and for what? He still never drank from that cup of wine. The young self had finally learned to let go, but the ghost who lived again had fallen into obsession, unable to turn back. In the darkness, the wind sounded forlorn. Only the demon's grating laughter remained. Whether he spoke for others to hear or merely muttered to himself was unclear.
You've fallen in love with her. You'll never find peace in death.
This time, Yanxi made no sound. Love and hate entangled. A chill wind howled past. This was the darkest night before dawn. Dew soaked my clothes. I felt the biting cold, but my mind grew even clearer. The Xue family's grand command mansion, the capital. I had left them all far behind me. In the faint, pale light, the outline of the city gate emerged, immense and silent. I did not hesitate. I galloped out. The very instant my warhorse burst through the city gate, it felt as if something snapped behind me. Perhaps it was the tether of fate. I lifted my gaze to the moon, across the vast open fields. The moon has also turned into a star, no longer hanging above the high walls and grand courtyard. Those tearful, sorrowful eyes. Zhuxin, oh Zhuxin. So the world is this wide after all. Beyond the 10-mile pavilion, a figure stands alone, clad in silver armor, a long spear resting at his side.
Your handwriting is quite similar.
Meng Changhuan studies me closely, covered in dust, yet my eyes are bright. She raises an eyebrow in surprise.
I almost considered going back to rescue you.
No need. I lift my chin slightly.
Just a minor hiccup.
She doesn't press further and tosses me the canteen.
Drink.
The water is cold. It flows down my throat, and my racing heart slowly steadies. Only then do I realize the day has broken, sunlight crossing over the night, changing the world. Meng Changhuan mounts his warhorse and turns back to look at me.
Shall we go?
Let's go. I break into a smile. We must keep moving. The past is not worth mentioning. The world is vast. Ahead, the sunlight glimmers faintly.